College football nerds here talking UCLA and USC, a Pac-12 preview from the nerds. We're getting nerdy with y'all. I got Josh here with me. We're going to walk through our computer model on this game, maybe uncover some things that people have some misconceptions about these two teams. It'll be fun. We did a hypothetical, if you haven't seen it already or if it hasn't been released yet. We did a hypothetical this week of Tennessee versus Ohio State versus TCU. All three of those teams playing one another, how that would shake out in our computer model. So check that one out as well. All right, Josh, let's get into this one. There are maybe some misconceptions about these two teams, and we'll probably uncover some of those after we walk through the model. But first, before we get into the model, when you think about picking a game like this, and both teams have played a similar but not exact schedule within the same conference, haven't yet played anybody of note out of conference, and I'll note for the UCLA fans that are listening, it's not UCLA's fault that there's not a Power 5 team out of conference on the schedule. Michigan canceled on UCLA last minute, left them kind of holding the bag. And then you got Fresno and Rice on USC's side, but you got a boatload of points. Like, when you're going into thinking about picking this game, what's going through your mind knowing that both these teams can light up the scoreboard? And I think what were you saying, the over-under is like 73? Like, how do you even start with a game like this?
Yeah, it's challenging because, obviously USC hasn't played UCLA yet. They haven't played Notre Dame. The big data points that are usually there to help sort of base where you want to evaluate a team don't exist. And so the challenge is trying to figure out how good a team is based off relative level of competition, who they played. And that's where you start getting into the weird sort of bean counting of college football and talking about who you've played, how good they are, nitpicking them. I don't love transitive property for the same reason everyone else does. If just because you beat a team, they beat somebody else, doesn't mean you beat that other team. College football is matchups dependent. Games play out differently every time. But when you try to figure out a whole season, then you have to do kind of a little bit of nitpicking on quality of wins and quality of opponents. And over the course of 4 or 5 games, it starts to matter. That's what we're at here. And our model is purely relational. It's purely based off opponent quality. And we try to use it as a baseline because it gives an honest take of, hey, this is how well you actually did relative to how well those teams did against everybody else. And that's about the best you can do. And I think honestly, a computer is very helpful in this context. And I will say our model doesn't use recruiting rankings. It doesn't use prior season results. There's a reason for that. If you look at USC in a lot of advanced metrics, they're going to be ranked a little bit higher probably than our model would because they recruit well. And the theory there is if you recruit really well, that's one of the better indicators that your team is going to outperform maybe their on-field performance. And I think typically over the course of the season, you improve more than other teams due to that. But what we really, really want to see in our model is just, hey, how have you actually done on the field? Like, I want an honest opinion of what does your season really look like from a quality perspective once you use a computer to try to even out all that opponent quality stuff. And so that's what our model does. And we'll try to walk through it. And hey, if you're a cool Cali guy and you like it, maybe you like and subscribe and follow us more because we do these a lot nationally. And unfortunately, due to the schedule with USC, we just hadn't been able to cover them yet because they're really outside the Utah game, which was a big week, hadn't had the chance. And even that Utah game, Pac-12 After Dark wrapped up right as our live show was ending. And we never really got the chance to talk about it. So we just really wanted to make an effort to cover a Pac-12 game this year.
Why don't you go ahead and get us into the model, especially all of those cool Cali guys. And yeah, I am poking fun at you a little bit.
Yeah, well, I'm clearly a cool Cali guy myself. No, so our model, it's a relational model based off how you did against other teams. And then what it does is it tries to figure out what this game is going to look like from like a yardage performance perspective. And then it looks at how your past games have gone. And it said, what is it taken for you to score? And not just like pure points per play, but where do you start scoring? Where do you stop scoring? And it's sort of a self-learning concept where every team ends up having their own unique scoring model built for it. And in this one of the first things that jumps out at you is this statistic of opponent averages allowed. So if you are playing a team that averages 4 yards a carry and you allow 3, then you allowed 75% of their averages. It's a pretty direct way to account for opponent quality. Relative to opponent quality, USC's defense doesn't look great. 111% of opponent averages is not a good number. I think it's not unexpected given the fact that they're allowing almost 4.5 yards a carry. But I think it's even more telling that their opponents aren't particularly good running the ball to start with. 99% of opponent passing average is also not really a great number. You want to see that lower because you've got some teams like Rice thrown in, pad your stats a little bit. UCLA's numbers also aren't great, frankly. 92% pass and run isn't great. And that means both these teams kind of get what they get from a yardage perspective. Only UCLA is expected to run the ball even better than average because USC is a below average run defense even by Pac-12 standards. You see this coming out about 6.7 yards per play for USC, 7.5 yards per play for UCLA. And then from a score perspective, our model puts that out to be USC 29, UCLA 33. So it gives UCLA a 4-point advantage, where right now, as I understand it, Vegas gives USC the advantage with 3 points.
And I'm not entirely surprised here. When you're talking about some of the misconceptions and maybe just, we were talking before we hit record on this, and you were like, a lot of people might think, well, USC, they haven't played a lot of great teams, but they're handling their business. They've got one loss, but they could even make back their way into the playoffs if they went out. The issue is UCLA played Washington, Utah, and at Oregon all in a row. Like that's a tough stretch. Washington and Oregon are two teams that aren't on USC's schedule this year. So from that standpoint, like UCLA has, and if you look at the outcomes, I know, like you said, transitive property is not a thing that we really care about, but at some point, there's some consistency there. 1-score loss to Arizona versus a 1-score win. They played Arizona State about the same. They played Colorado about the same. Played Stanford about the same. At some point, it turns out that these two teams are really close, and they are very similar. I don't know in this case, home versus road splits really matter that much. That is maybe a low-key dig at the attendance that we've seen this year for UCLA. But in general, the thing that worries me a little bit if I'm wanting to pick USC is game dynamics. When you get a slow start versus Colorado and then pile it on, or a slow start versus somebody like Oregon State, that's one thing. And USC has had a number of slow starts this year. UCLA is a team that's going to score points in this game. So it completely changes how you approach the game and your normal offense if you're digging yourself out of a 17-0 hole in the midway through the second quarter, which is something that is very possible given how we've seen USC play so far this year. So if I'm looking at both of these teams, both capable of scoring a lot of points, both have kind of meh defenses, the one that's kind of struggled to get going early is the one that's going to give me the most concern, at least, just looking at it from a 50,000-foot view.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. UCLA scoring, their floor this year has been about 28 points, right? 4-touchdown team at a minimum. They've scored a lot of points every game. And I think as the season goes along, between DDR, between Charbonnet, the way they run their offense, they get more and more sort of consistent. They get more and more effective. Most of those spread run teams, be it Malzahn, the Todd Graham tree, Kelly's is the same way, just get better and better as the season goes along because their offensive line, frankly, just gets better and better at running it. The backs get better and better at reading those plays. And so, yeah, it may be simple in theory, but it's a simple thing that they've run 1,000 times and you're seeing for the first time that week. So they have usually a late season advantage. I do think that means the UCLA is a tough out. But I will say that there are, some matchups that are challenging for both these teams. In particular, when I look at UCLA and what they struggled with, like last week's an example, but it's come up a few times with mobile quarterbacks, and they had trouble with Oregon as well. They don't do a good job of containing active mobile quarterbacks. It's kind of giving them fits. I think their athleticism at times is limited defensively, and it kind of breaks everything in the defensive end. They end up giving up a lot of points. Well, if there's one thing we know about Williams at USC is that he's a mobile guy. And I think USC offensively is a team that is built to try to create shot plays. They're, that whole tree out of Lincoln Riley is this kind of a power RPO concept he brought with him from Oklahoma, that they have the RPO plays, but they really try to mix in more power elements into it. But it is built around trying to create shot plays downfield. And I think Williams at times struggles with reads and consistency. But if those guys are really open, he's got a big arm. He can throw it anywhere on the field. So if the guys are open, he's going to get the ball to them. And it really depends on whether or not you can get him uncomfortable in the pocket. So you've got some interesting, I think, dynamics in that, UCLA team that runs the ball really well against a USC defense that doesn't defend the run. It's likely that UCLA is going to get a lot of momentum and move it. But on the other side of the ball, I also think USC's offense is the style of offense that UCLA struggled with defensively. So I really walk away from this actually kind of differently from the model, thinking this is a high-scoring game. And again, we base our analysis on our own thought, not Vegas. But I will say Vegas over-under, I think right now is 74, which is a pretty high number, 37 points on each side. Vegas also sees this as a high-scoring game. And I think that's something the model numbers, we're not tied to it for a reason. They're not going to see. Is I think the particular schemes and matchups involved here favor both offenses. So you start to, I think, wrap your mind around who's going to get a better job of making the other one uncomfortable and who's going to be doing a better job of just finding some way to get an edge, because I think both teams are going to score and score often.
Yeah, and I think there's some nuance to your note about UCLA struggling with mobile quarterbacks, because what people think of that is that they think of, oh, well, you're going to, to exploit you, we need to run all over you. Caleb Williams is a guy that's very mobile, but doesn't run that much. Like 3.5 yards a carry, 280 yards on the season. The thing that he does, if we look at last week versus Arizona, UCLA faced a mobile quarterback, somewhat mobile, but the issue was the 11.3 yards per attempt, right?
Right.
And that's where Caleb Williams might be able to really exploit, is like, it's just to be able to buy some time and exploit your secondary breaking down or your scheme breaking down, because it's only good for so long. It's only good because you don't have a good you're not explosive on the defensive line or their front seven to get after the quarterback. And I think that's going to be an issue here. My concern, though, and I'm going to give my pick, and I'm picking UCLA, and here's why. In all of these games where, the spread is about the same, or they played about the same as UCLA, the issue was USC scored a lot more points, but they gave up a lot more points. And look, 41-14 at one point against Stanford, so I'm not really killing them for giving up 28 points to Stanford. But 35 to Cal last week, 37 to Arizona, and even if some of these points are late, these are one-score games, right? So you can't discount late points in a one-score game. You can in Stanford. And so other than that Washington State game, which I think was pretty impressive because Washington State's offense has been pretty good this year, USC hasn't given me any comfort defensively that they can put it together against a team that can score some points. I agree with Vegas. A lot of points in this one. 42-37 UCLA. That's my score.
So my pick is UCLA 41-37 because, again, we never planned this, but we're way too alike most of the time when we pick these. It's a lot of the same concepts. And I'll tell you on my end, my concern is both these teams look like teams that can give up points. But if I have to pick, I am more confident that a run-based team, and Chip Kelly's scheme in particular, which is very consistent, is going to be able to consistently put up points. If you're just getting gouged by the run, it's hard for that to happen and it not turn into an avalanche. Certainly, 4 points, 3-point spread. This is a game that anybody can win. I just think when push comes to shove, that there's reason to be more bullish that Kelly's going to be able to get enough production to win a shootout. I think Riley's an offensive genius, but the problem is the defensive side of the ball, right? Every point you score is a point the other team allows. I got more confidence that Kelly's going to find some tricks, because I've always felt like from a defensive perspective, he's been really underrated. His whole career, he's taken teams that weren't maybe necessarily that talented on the defensive end, and he's found ways to craft them into good defenses, particularly in big games. They've played really good defense throughout his career at Oregon and at UCLA at times. I haven't really seen that with Lincoln Riley. I mean, his defenses have gotten shredded many times, and in big games, they've often gotten shredded worse than at other occasions. So I lean a little bit towards Chip Kelly in this game. I'm picking UCLA as well. Certainly wouldn't shock me if USC wins, but it will also, frankly, won't shock me if UCLA just runs away with this one. It's by far USC's biggest challenge of the season. I think creates a lot of types of challenges that USC hasn't seen, and UCLA having played better competition to date is probably a pretty serious advantage because it shows them some things where they were weak and they needed to shore up, some things that work, some things that don't, and they're probably going to go into this game. You can talk about the Arizona loss, but maybe that was just sort of a lead up, as you often see, to a team that's not quite mentally focused that week because they're about to drill the team the next week. Yeah, I got picking UCLA to win this one.
All right, y'all, that's it for us on USC and UCLA. Let us know in the comments. This is your only homework other than liking and subscribing. Let us know what you think the score is going to be, and let us know why you think we're wrong, why you think we're crazy. We'll get down there and mix it up with you. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great week, and God bless.